Welcome to Serial Killer Files. I'm your host, Arthur Morgan, and today we're diving deep into one of America's most perplexing criminal mysteries. For over 5 decades, the Zodiac Killer has captivated our collective imagination, not just because of his brutal crimes, but because of the chilling glimpse he offered into the mind of a killer operating in the shadows. This isn't just another true crime story. This is an exploration of a criminal mastermind who turned terror into what he believed was art, who transformed murder into a psychological game with an entire population. The Zodiac wasn't just a killer. He was a performer, a narcissist, a mathematician, and perhaps most disturbingly, someone who saw himself as divinely important. Over the next hour, we'll peel back the layers of this enigmatic figure. We'll explore his psychology, decode his symbols, analyze his communications, and ultimately try to understand what drove a man to believe that his reign of terror was justified, even necessary. But first, let me set the stage. When the Zodiac first emerged in the public eye, his actions were both astonishing and perplexing. 7 young lives were tragically lost during his confirmed killing spree. Yet beyond the trail of bodies, the Zodiac's true legacy lies in something far more insidious. His letters, phone calls, and cryptic messages that offered a rare and unsettling glimpse into a killer's psyche. What makes this case particularly haunting is that justice has yet to be delivered. The Zodiac remains unidentified, his case unsolved, adding gravity to its historical and legal importance. But perhaps more disturbing is what we've learned about him through his own words and actions, revelations that challenge everything we think we know about serial killers. Step into the shadows of true crime with Serial Killer Files by Skoob, a chilling deep dive into the minds of history's deadliest murderers. Peel back the layers of infamous cases, explore hidden motives, and uncover the psychological horrors that drove ordinary people to commit unimaginable acts. From blood-stained crime scenes to bone-chilling confessions, Serial Killer Files doesn't just tell you the story, it drags you into the darkness. If you're obsessed with forensic evidence, psychological profiling, and spine-tingling real-life mysteries, you need Serial Killer Files, exclusively on Skoob, the AI-powered podcast app designed for true crime addicts. With over 1,500 terrifying episodes, each one is a short, intense ride that hooks you from the first second to the last. Download Skoob now on the App Store or Google Play. Dare to listen if you think you can handle the truth behind the world's most horrifying serial killers. Let's start with the most fundamental question. What kind of person was the Zodiac Killer? To understand his crimes, we first need to understand his psychology, and all evidence points to one inescapable conclusion. The Zodiac was a severe pathological narcissist and psychopath. Pathological narcissism is recognized as a psychological disorder and is notably one of the core aspects of psychopathy. But here's what's crucial to understand. While narcissists might still have the capacity to experience emotions like shame and guilt, psychopaths typically lack such scruples and can be more overtly harmful and destructive. The Zodiac embodied every characteristic of severe narcissism. He displayed an omnipresent sense of self-centeredness, profound distrust, an insatiable desire for status, paranoia, and extreme sensitivity to criticism. His grandiose sense of self manifested both overtly and in his fantasies. He saw himself as extraordinary, possessing rare talents, which led him to believe he was above laws and regulations. This mindset involved a fixation on power, success, and personal superiority. Severe narcissists tend to display what psychologists call grandiose exhibitionism. They boast, distort truths, exaggerate accomplishments, and fabricate stories of success to maintain their inflated self-image. According to psychiatrist Alve Dahl, these individuals often yearn for recognition, perhaps even on a national scale. The Zodiac's behavior perfectly exemplified this. His response to criticism was telling. When journalist Paul Avery wrote critically about him, the Zodiac issued a death threat. He threatened killing sprees if his demands were ignored and relished belittling law enforcement when they failed to capture him, taunting them as being outsmarted. But perhaps most revealing was his grandiose sense of indifference toward human life and his use of the phrase, "This is the Zodiac speaking." This phrase suggests an exaggerated sense of self-importance, reminiscent of divine or authoritative assertions. It wasn't just a greeting, it was a proclamation of superiority. Yet here's what makes psychopaths particularly dangerous. Despite their often flamboyant arrogance, they can be challenging to identify. They're adept at wearing what psychologists term the mask of sanity, presenting as normal, charming, and personable individuals. They excel at making positive first impressions, subsequently aiming to exploit the trust and confidence of others. The Zodiac himself revealed this vulnerability. He admitted to feelings of loneliness due to being overlooked by the media, which fueled his homicidal inclinations. This reveals a crucial aspect of psychopathic narcissists. They rely heavily on external validation. Without admiration, success, and respect, they experience crippling feelings of emptiness and depression. But the Zodiac's psychological profile becomes even more complex when we consider his behavioral patterns. Criminal profiler Walter, who specializes in solving cold cases, identified the Zodiac as what's known as a power-assertive killer. This profile fits far better than traditional theories suggesting such killers act out of low self-esteem and inadequacy. Power-assertive killers are deeply aware of their image. A significant part of their psyche involves maintaining a facade of power and control. They refrain from mutilating victims, perceiving such actions as perverse and inconsistent with their need to project strength. This image consciousness might explain why the Zodiac initially abducted Kathleen Johns but ultimately decided against making her a victim, letting her escape instead. Crucially, power-assertive offenders like the Zodiac feel their crimes only have significance if they are recognized by others. For the Zodiac, this need for recognition extended to the entire population of the Bay Area. This characteristic explains his compulsion to send letters boasting about his deeds, setting him apart from other killers with similar profiles. Former FBI behavioral profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole noted that the very name Zodiac suggests a persona that views itself as omnipotent, characterized by arrogance, love of power, and control, traits consistent with a power-assertive personality type. However, the Zodiac's ironic humor, prominently featured in his letters, deviates from typical power-assertive conduct. Such humor isn't common among killers matching this profile, highlighting the Zodiac's distinctiveness even further. Walter emphasizes that only one individual, the Zodiac, embodied all these distinct behavioral traits specific to both power-assertive killers and his own unique characteristics. Now, here's where the Zodiac's psychology takes a truly disturbing turn. Evidence suggests that the Zodiac killer misunderstood the public perception of his actions, intending for his crimes to be seen as a sophisticated form of performance art. His expectation was that both the general public and a select group of intellectuals would appreciate and decode his intricate messages, delivered through subtle artistic elements like illusion, costume, and cryptic clues. In reality, he vastly misjudged his audience's capacity for empathy and comprehension. The public's reaction was one of horror rather than understanding, and his intricate messaging failed to resonate as he had anticipated. But this disconnect didn't stop him. It seemed to compel him to refine his approach in future correspondence, though his violent acts continued unabated. The Zodiac appeared to deflect personal accountability for the heinous acts he committed, insisting that the urgency of conveying his message justified his spree of violence. This sentiment of self-exoneration was echoed years later by the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, who wrote that responsibility lay elsewhere. The Zodiac, however, simplistically implied that the weight of his deeds would rest upon the conscience of others with his chilling statement, "It will be on your conscience, not mine." The origins of the Zodiac's choice to use performance art as a medium likely emerged during the early stages of his killings. The Z408 cipher marked one of the earliest known examples where he alluded to his crimes euphemistically, describing the people he killed as collecting of slaves. In doing so, he boldly provoked the police, essentially daring them to capture him and put an end to his reign of terror. But the Zodiac's artistic pretensions went deeper. By dissecting his use of the word conscience into its roots, con meaning against, and science, referring to scientific progress, the Zodiac might have suggested he was opposed to technological advancements, aligning with an ideology critical of modern industrial society. This etymological play potentially unveiled another layer of his contentious visions. The idea of impending disaster and the necessity to avoid it, a sentiment later elaborated upon in the infamous Unabomber Manifesto, may have had its seeds in the Zodiac's communications. Kaczynski predicted that a significant catastrophe looms due to unchecked industrialization, seeing temporary crises as a path to prevent far greater future devastation. The Zodiac expressed a remarkably similar viewpoint in a December 1969 letter to attorney Melvin Belli, arguing that unless he executed the killing of one or two individuals, a large-scale catastrophe, illustrated through the metaphor of a bomb detonation, was unavoidable. He presented a grim choice between limited loss of life or a catastrophic event caused by what he fashioned as his death machine. Both killers positioned their violent actions as rational choices in the face of apocalyptic alternatives, framing themselves not as the architects of chaos, but as reluctant messengers of a grim existential dilemma. This reveals perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Zodiac's psychology. He genuinely believed his murders were necessary, even noble acts. The Zodiac's psychological complexity is perhaps nowhere more evident than in his use of symbols and codes. His mathematical acumen was evident not only in his choice of various symbols and vocabulary, but also in his apparent knowledge of explosives and cryptography. Most telling was his selection of a personal identifier, the crosshair symbol. This symbol, elemental to mathematics, serves as a visual representation of mathematical concepts and was similarly utilized by Ted Kaczynski during his short-lived mathematics career. The crosshair, a simple cross imposed over a circle, added another layer of mystery to the Zodiac case and set him apart from other serial killers. While most notorious criminals are given monikers by law enforcement, the media, or occasionally themselves, the Zodiac is uniquely noted for adopting a personal symbol alongside his name. This adoption led to intense curiosity and speculation among investigators about its significance and origins. Initially, the crosshair symbol was interpreted as a reference to firearms, consistent with the murder weapons used at Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs Park. The symbol made its debut in the three-part letters, concluding the killer's message as if it were either a salutation or perhaps a foreboding of further violence. However, the way the Zodiac utilized the crosshair was unconventional. Unlike typical representations by gun enthusiasts, where the center is generally clear to aid in aiming, the Zodiac's version sometimes involved dividing the circle into sections or adding other markings and numbers, demonstrating deviations from the standard. The arrival of subsequent letters led to reinterpretations. Historical associations emerged where the symbol and name coincided. Zodiac watches displayed both the name and an analogous symbol, and the Ford Zodiac featured a crosshair-like ornament. This suggested the symbol might merely represent the Zodiac himself. But the mystery deepened with each new correspondence. In the 6-page letter, the Zodiac marked the circle into 12 sections, akin to a clock face. In the map letter, he positioned his symbol above Mount Diablo and inscribed numbers around the circle, 0, 3, 6, and 9. These evolutions raised questions. Why was the killer embellishing his emblem with such precise variations? Each modification deepened the enigma surrounding the Zodiac's identity and motives, highlighting his penchant for confounding both investigators and the public with cryptic messaging. The usage of the crosshair symbol became a fascinating component of his psychological profile, reflecting a methodical yet provocative character. No exploration of the Zodiac's mind would be complete without delving into his ciphers, perhaps the most tangible evidence of his complex psychology and desperate need for intellectual validation. No one knows for certain what sparked his interest in ciphers, but when he sent out his first cipher divided into 3 segments to various newspapers, he launched one of cryptography's most enduring mysteries. Despite its historical significance, only this first cipher has been completely deciphered. Considered the easiest among those he sent, it was cracked by Donald and Betty Hardin from North Salinas, California, within just a week. Betty's efforts are particularly noteworthy due to her identification of 2 cribs, suspected words or phrases within the text. Understanding the Zodiac's quest for attention, Betty assumed the message would likely start with I and might include kill or I like killing. Her assumptions proved correct, revealing a chilling message. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. The phrase "man is the most dangerous animal of all" intrigued investigators due to its apparent connection to the 1932 film The Most Dangerous Game, where a Russian count hunts humans on his secluded island. Was the Zodiac a movie enthusiast who saw killings as sport? The decoded message continued. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the people I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name, because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. This reveals the Zodiac's grandiose delusions about the afterlife and his belief in a cosmic reward for his crimes. But an unsolved string of 18 letters at the end of this cipher remains a mystery. Some suggest it could represent the Zodiac's name, encoded in a more intricate manner. After the Hardins cracked this initial code, the Zodiac sent 3 more ciphers the following year. These didn't employ the simplistic letter substitution technique, bewildering both amateur and professional cryptanalysts for decades. Then, in December 2020, after 51 years of mystification, the second cipher was finally deciphered by David Orenchok, Jarl von Eyck, and Sam Blake. The revelation was equally chilling. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show, which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me. This message referenced a TV show appearance where someone called claiming to be the Zodiac, which the real killer wanted to distance himself from. It also reinforced his delusions about paradise and slaves, showing consistency in his grandiose afterlife fantasies. The solving of this cipher after decades demonstrates the Zodiac's sophisticated understanding of cryptography. He wasn't just creating random puzzles, he was crafting complex mathematical challenges that would stump experts for generations. If you can't get enough of true crime and the twisted psychology behind the world's most infamous murderers, Serial Killer Files by Skoob is the podcast you need in your life. Explore real cases, disturbing confessions, and the terrifying truths behind history's most brutal killers, all in gripping, bite-sized episodes perfect for binging. Hit follow and subscribe to Serial Killer Files on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and make sure you never miss a chilling new drop from the darkest corners of the human mind. Segment 5. The Media Manipulator. Now let's return back to the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac's relationship with the media reveals perhaps the most calculated aspect of his personality. His communications weren't random outbursts. They were carefully orchestrated performances designed to maximize fear and attention. This becomes crystal clear when we examine his reaction to specific news coverage and his strategic timing of letters. A perfect example emerged when journalist Paul Avery brought to light a piece titled "Closed Session in Riverside. Police Confer on Zodiac Killings." The article detailed a 9-hour meeting where law enforcement officials supported the belief that the Zodiac was responsible for Sherry Jo Bates's death. They speculated he might have been a fellow student at Riverside City College, a teacher, a military serviceman, or a traveling salesman. The investigators suspected the Zodiac had deliberately obscured his link to Riverside, fearing he'd made a crucial mistake that could point to his identity. They found compelling evidence, including the inscription of initials RH, and believed the Zodiac himself authored the confession in this case. Following extensive coverage of the Riverside connection, including headlines like "Detectives Hope to Find Zodiac's Handwriting in City College Records," the Zodiac felt compelled to respond. On March 13, 1971, after reading numerous articles about the Riverside murder he was suspected of committing, he sent a letter to the Los Angeles Times from Pleasanton. Handwriting expert John J. Harris confirmed without doubt that the handwriting belonged to the Zodiac. In this letter, the Zodiac expressed frustration over the lack of prominent front-page coverage in some newspapers, a clear indication of his craving for public attention. This marked the first instance he explicitly mentioned Riverside, albeit using the vague term activity. The Zodiac was notorious for toying with those who pursued him, leveraging their thirst for information without offering real assistance. He likely relished taunting detectives and leading them off course. His phrase, "crack proof," suggested his claim of authoring earlier correspondence, implying either genuine authorship or awareness of copycat scenarios. This pattern of media manipulation reveals a killer who was constantly monitoring news coverage of his crimes and carefully timing his responses for maximum psychological impact. He wasn't just killing for the thrill. He was orchestrating a public performance where he was simultaneously the director, star, and audience. The Zodiac's letters often included threats of killing sprees if his demands were ignored, and he took particular pleasure in belittling law enforcement when they failed to capture him. He was playing a game where the stakes were human lives, but the prize was public recognition and fear. Analyzing the Zodiac's crimes reveals a disturbing pattern that speaks to his specific psychological motivations. His communications were purposely crafted to taunt and terrorize society, lacking substantive revelations, yet displaying a clear desire to evoke public fear. Unsurprisingly, he refrained from divulging personal psychological traumas or influences that may have shaped him into a murderer. This raises the eternal debate. Was he innately inclined to kill, or was he shaped by his environment and upbringing? The Zodiac himself seemed unable to rationalize his deadly actions, as evidenced by the inconsistent and often rambling nature of his letters, coupled with illogical threads. The Zodiac had a particular fixation on attacking couples, responsible for at least 3, and potentially 5 such assaults. This pattern suggests he harbored resentment and discontent with his personal romantic life. His motivations were complex and likely evolved over time. For instance, he possibly killed Paulie Stein to prove he could murder a man, a feat he hadn't succeeded in during previous attacks on couples. His craving for notoriety and public attention also seemed to fuel his actions, evident when media coverage satisfied him after Stein's murder. Investigating the timeline reveals that while actively committing murders, he wrote some letters, yet he authored many while falsely claiming responsibility for murders he didn't commit. This pattern of false claims reveals a killer desperate to inflate his reputation and instill maximum fear. Intriguingly, his sudden silence between March 1971 and January 1974 remains unexplained. One might speculate he faced incarceration for an unrelated offense, but given the evidence available from crime scenes and letters, it's less plausible he would have gone unnoticed post-arrest. During this era, the absence of tools like the automated fingerprint identification system hindered identification processes. The notion that he was preoccupied with personal relationships during this hiatus seems implausible, considering his disturbed psychological state. Yet some serial killers, such as Dennis Rader, the BDK killer, maintain marriages amidst their crime sprees, suggesting such duality isn't beyond possibility. Perhaps the most psychologically revealing aspect of the Zodiac story is how it ended. Not with a dramatic capture or final confrontation, but with what appears to be an identity crisis that led to his gradual disappearance from public consciousness. In his later correspondences, there's a notable shift in how the Zodiac identifies himself, which some speculate indicates fatigue with his notorious persona. In his third consecutive letter, he refrains from calling himself Zodiac. In the letter associated with the Symbionese Liberation Army, he called himself a friend. In the Badlands letter, he used the moniker a citizen. Later, he adopted the name the Red Phantom, yet still eschewed the Zodiac identity he had cultivated over several years. Such changes could suggest the Zodiac was wearying of this self-constructed identity, or even symbolically killing off the Zodiac character. This speculation gains weight considering that more than 4 years had passed without a confirmed murder attributed to him. Many theorize that a serial killer like the Zodiac cannot simply cease murdering, but the truth is more nuanced. While some serial killers are compelled by addiction-like urges, not all are. A profit-driven killer may not have the same compulsive drive as one motivated by sexual gratification. For those with addiction-like motivation, the intensity can decrease with age as fantasy life begins to dominate. Although it seems improbable for serial killers to simply stop, history records instances of those who halted their murderous activities voluntarily. Gary Ridgway significantly reduced his killings upon finding happiness in marriage, illustrating that personal circumstances can influence a killer's actions. On a case-by-case basis, a serial killer may choose to scale back or entirely stop their criminal behavior depending on whether their needs are met or whether continuing poses too much risk compared to rewards. Some might realize their peak notoriety has passed, and any attempt to regenerate fame might raise their chances of getting caught. This behavioral analysis suggests the Zodiac could have ceased both killing and sending letters for attention, debunking the myth that serial killers are incapable of stopping once they start. The July 1974 letter ended what seemed to be an active phase, as he vanished without a trace afterward, at least in any confirmed circumstances. During his active years from 1968 to 1974, the Zodiac's infamy was significant in the Bay Area, instilling fear in the public amidst a time when many serial killers were operating, particularly in Northern California. Despite many attributing a range of murders to him due to the frenzy, he was only confirmed to have murdered 5 individuals. As we reach the end of our journey into the mind of the Zodiac, we're left with more questions than answers. And perhaps that's exactly what he intended. The Zodiac Killer represents something uniquely terrifying in the annals of criminal history. A killer who understood that fear itself could be his greatest weapon. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a psychological terrorist who held an entire region captive through a carefully orchestrated campaign of violence and mind games. His letters, codes, and symbols weren't just evidence. They were performances, designed to maximize the psychological impact of his crimes far beyond the immediate victims. What makes the Zodiac particularly chilling is how he combined multiple disturbing elements: the mathematical precision of a cryptographer, the grandiose delusions of a severe narcissist, the calculated manipulation of a media-savvy performer, and the cold brutality of a power-assertive killer. He saw himself as an artist, a messenger, even a necessary evil in a cosmic drama where human lives were merely props. The fact that he remains unidentified adds another layer to his psychological legacy. In a sense, he achieved exactly what he wanted: eternal notoriety without accountability. He became the ultimate boogeyman, a figure who exists more in our collective nightmares than in any prison cell. But as we've explored his psychology today, we've also demystified him somewhat. Beneath the cryptic symbols and grandiose proclamations was a deeply disturbed individual whose need for attention and validation drove him to commit unspeakable acts. His elaborate communications reveal not genius, but desperation. The desperate need of a narcissist to be seen, understood, and feared. The Zodiac story serves as a chilling reminder that monsters aren't always hiding in the shadows. Sometimes they're performing on a stage of their own creation, using our fascination with their crimes to feed their insatiable need for attention. 7 young lives were tragically lost to this man's delusions of grandeur. While we can be fascinated by his psychological complexity and the mystery surrounding his identity, we must never forget that his true legacy is one of murder and sorrow, a reminder of the cost borne by those whose lives he extinguished in service of his twisted vision of himself as a figure of cosmic importance. The Zodiac Killer may have disappeared into the shadows, but the psychological insights we've gained from studying his communications continue to inform our understanding of criminal psychology. In the end, perhaps that's the only positive legacy we can extract from this tale of terror, that by understanding monsters like the Zodiac, we might better recognize and stop the next one before they can begin their own twisted performance. I'm your host, Arthur Morgan, and you've been listening to Serial Killer Files, where we pull back the curtain on the most twisted minds and bone-chilling crimes in history. If this episode left you stunned or craving more cold, hard truths about serial killers, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your true crime fix. Still hungry for more intense, no-fluff true crime content? Discover Skoob, the AI-powered podcast app built for true crime addicts. With thousands of short, addictive episodes curated just for you, it's the fastest way to go deeper into the darkest cases. Download Skoob now on the App Store or Google Play and start binging your next obsession